Good afternoon and welcome to the WEIM Governing Body General Session meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and all attendee lines are currently muted to reduce background noise. When we get to the public comment portion of the call, you can please press the raise hand icon on Zoom, or if you are dialed into the phone-only line, you can press #2 to enter the comment queue. And with that, I'd now like to turn the meeting over to Chair Andrew Campbell. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Silas. Welcome to the May 21st meeting of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body. Thank you for joining us today. Now I'll turn it over to Corporate Secretary Roger Collington for the roll call.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. And we'll start with you, Chair Campbell.
Here.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
Member Prescott.
Here.
Member Wagner.
Here.
You are here. Okay. Great. We have a full complement for the governing body and a quorum, and we may proceed. Back to you, Chair Campbell.
Okay, thanks, Roger. So now we'll go to general public comment. This is public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Silas, can you please provide the instructions for public comment?
If you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon on Zoom, or if you are dialed into the phone-only line, please press #2 to enter the comment queue. With that, there are no comments in queue at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the decision on the minutes from the March 19th, 2024 Governing Body General Session meeting.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. If I can have a motion to approve the March 19th, 2024 General Session minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Anita. And
Rob,
second, Rob. Thank you. Chair Campbell, your vote?
Aye.
Vice Chair Konzioka?
Aye.
Member Decker?
Aye.
Member Prescott?
Aye.
And Member Wagner?
Aye.
Thank you, governing body. The motion passes. Back to you, Chair Campbell.
Okay, thank you. And before moving to the CEO report, I'd like to express some appreciation. Leading up to this cycle of governing body and board meetings, we've seen tremendous engagement by stakeholders. The diversity of the West is what is bringing market participants to the EIM and the extended day-ahead market. But that diversity also brings with it a variety of organizational structures, generation asset types, weather patterns. So stakeholder input, because of this diversity, is so critical to ensure that the decision makers like this governing body understand how your particular organization or interest is impacted by the market and the things we're looking at. This comment applies to today's meeting as well as the joint meeting tomorrow. So thank you so much to the stakeholders for your continued engagement, commitment, and goodwill. And thank you to the ISO staff for continuing your monitoring, reporting, and transparency and expert analysis of the issues impacting the market. We're going to hear some staff presentations today as well as tomorrow, and that's really a big part of increasing market confidence. So now I'm going to introduce ISO CEO Elliot Mainzer for the CEO report.
Thank you very much, Chair Campbell and members of the governing body. I'll start by echoing your sentiment there, Chair Campbell. It really has been a remarkable period just these last few months, the amount of stakeholder engagement, just a ton of really, really helpful feedback on a number of really critical issues, and also just a tip of the hat to my entire team. Everybody's just really leaning in at the moment. And it really has been a very consequential series of outcomes these last few months. I'm going to highlight just a few things. I want to start out, I think just in general, I think it's important for us to share as we start turning the corner into summer. Reliability is always job number one for us here at the CAISO. And this summer, as we head into the heart of the season, we feel generally very strong about our position. This is the first time in a number of years we're walking into the summer meeting the 1 in 10 loss of load expectation. I think, as you know, we've brought on board with our partners in state government and the utilities over 15,000 megawatts of new generation over these last 3 years. We've now got over 8,500 megawatts of lithium-ion batteries on the system. The control center operators feel very familiar with those resources now, very well positioned going into the summer. We've begun our tabletop exercises with the state and the utilities. Last week, we had our summer readiness roundtable where we were able to hear from balancing authorities from across the West on their preparedness and the steps that they're taking to make sure that the transmission grid and resources are as well positioned as possible. And generally, I think it's just feeling guardedly optimistic for good outcomes this summer. I think we always have to state, as we know, never quite sure what Mother Nature will throw at us. We continue to have exposure to extreme weather, we have and wildfires and other events. But I think certainly the work that's been done inside California on resource adequacy here has given us just a lot of encouragement that the CAISO footprint is looking really quite good going into the summer. So thanks to everybody for all the work. Of course, just turning the page to the Western energy imbalance market, again, very encouraged that during the first quarter of 2024, the WEIM's 22 participants realized $436 million in benefits for their consumers. This, of course, was a period in Q1 that stretched over the January 13th through 15th Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend, during the time in which energy transfers from California and the Southwest were very important in helping to meet demand in the Pacific Northwest Balancing Authority areas that needed assistance due to heightened demand from very, very low temperatures. Of course, that $436 million now helped bring the cumulative total benefits for the Western EIM to $5.49 billion. That's obviously a significant amount of economic savings, but I think as we've seen over and over again through some very challenging operating conditions in recent years, that the reliability value of being able to leverage wide area transmission and resource diversity becomes increasingly important part of the equation. Turning to the extended day-ahead market, this has also been a very, very encouraging period since we last were together back in March. We were very pleased that on March 21st, when Portland General Electric announced that it plans to join the extended day-ahead market. Of course, on that same day, Idaho Power released a letter stating that it is also leaning towards joining the market when it launches in 2026. And then, of course, just back on April 25th, PacifiCorp became the first entity to formally commit to joining EDAM by signing an implementation agreement with the CAISO for its participation. So extremely encouraged as we see the footprint of the extended day-ahead market continue to grow, spanning a significant portion of the West. We look forward to continued progress on that front. And of course, at the same time, we are very encouraged by the progress that the Pathways Initiative is making, exploring additional governance enhancements. I would say that the focus and dedication of that diverse group of stakeholders is really, quite frankly, inspiring. We really, really appreciate all their work. And at the CAISO, we will continue to stay positioned as a source of technical input for that team as it does its work. And of course, looking forward to the update from the launch committee at tomorrow's joint general session. Just a couple of housekeeping items. I also wanted to note that the ISO did file our access charge tariff revisions with FERC on April 12th. This, of course, was the one element of our design that FERC denied without prejudice back in December 2023. So it's nice to have that filing back in front of the commission, hoping to hear from them sometime here in the not too distant future. And thanks to all the stakeholders who worked with us to refine the language around those provisions of our EDAM tariff. I will also note that on April 30th, FERC did accept our compliance filing submitted back on February 16th to clarify certain tariff provisions effectuating aspects of the EDAM and our day-ahead market enhancements in compliance with the directives of the December 2023 order approving these designs. So these are all really important developments as we continue to make progress on EDAM development and expansion, and of course, implementation, which you'll hear some more about tomorrow as well. I wanted just to turn note briefly, we sort of starting to take these things for granted, but of course, back on April 8th, there was a solar eclipse that passed over the United States. Of course, no part of the Western energy imbalance market fell entirely within the path of totality But we did see some impacts in the desert Southwest and Southern California. And this event, it passed quite quietly, but it was not for lack of preparation. We took a number of protective measures to manage the eclipse conditions, including adjustments to regulation needs, charging storage resources ahead of time, and some additional procurement of day-ahead capacity. So big appreciation to all of the folks in our control center and their partners across the West who did a good job managing to that event. The final thing I wanted just to mention, a product that's been in the works for quite some time now, and I'm happy to say that after a lot of hard work by our creative and web services, corporate systems, and architecture teams, we're ready at the end of this month to launch the new and improved kaiso.com website. I'm really excited about this effort. It's more than just a new design. I think it's going to be a much more robust content platform, a publisher and content management system that I think is going to give ISO staff the needed tools to keep information flowing out to customers, stakeholders, and the general public. And I think it's going to be a really nice new interface for our broad customer and stakeholder community. So thanks to everybody who put so much work into that. And there will be lots of training opportunities. And we can continue to push information out there to make sure everybody has as seamless experience as possible as they transition to the new site. I'll just mention, as I turn it back to you, Chair Campbell, certainly really appreciate all the work that's gone into the issue around raising the bid cap for hydro and storage resources. Looking forward to hearing from Susan Pope later today. That is a very important issue. We've tried to do really our very, very best job of being responsive to the need and trying to find a solution that we think is appropriate given the schedule and implementation challenges, but really addresses what I think is an important issue for our market design. So again, so many thanks to so many folks for all their contributions in the stakeholder community and all the staff and to the governing body. Thanks to all of you, as always, for your engagement and support. So back to you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Elliot. Do governing body members have any questions or comments? Okay, thanks, Elliot. So now we're going to hear an update from the body of state regulators. We're joined by Haley Williamson, Chair of the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada and Chair of the body of state regulators. Chair Williamson.
Thank you so much, Chair Campbell, Vice Chair Kanzioka, and members of the governing body. Thanks for having me here today. Since my last update in March, the BOSSR held its biannual in-person meeting in Denver prior to the CREPC WEIM conference at the end of April. At that meeting, we received updates on the KAISO's Price Formation Enhancement Working Group, as well as other recent EDAM developments and future milestones for the initiative. Although the BOSSR is not formally submitting comments to the ISO or advice to the governing body at this stage of development of the draft tariff language for bidding above the soft offer cap rules under the Price Formation Enhancements Initiative, due to the expedited pace of that initiative, the BOSSR does remain informed of the initiative's progress and will assess if and when it will provide a consensus opinion on the tariff language. The BOSSR will also continue to monitor the other working groups that the membership has prioritized as they continue to evolve and mature into formal policy initiatives. In addition to our meeting in April, in early May, the BOSSR hosted its Western Electricity Market Training Forum in partnership with Stanford University and KAISO. Commissioners and staff from states across the West and the Western Energy Imbalance Market were able to attend this two-day training that covered electricity market fundamentals. As many of you may know, the BOSSR has been hosting this training for its members for a few years now, and we're very grateful to Stanford for leading the training and to KAISO for hosting this event at their headquarters in Folsom. It was a great turnout. We continue to evolve and improve this market training to ensure commissioners and their staff are well equipped in understanding electricity market fundamentals, as well as the ongoing improvements made to the real-time and extended day-ahead markets across the footprint. Lastly, I will note that the BOSSR has been following the governing body WEIM nominating process through Vice Chair Aguilera. He's keeping us engaged and actively apprised of all of the updates, so we are getting those as this process nears completion. That is my very short report for today. We have our next meeting on June 14th, at which point we will have more updates on some of these initiatives going on. But as always, thanks for having me, and happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Williamson. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you for that update. I appreciate Bosser's continued focus on education. That's such a critical piece of this process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear an update on the Regional Issues Forum from RIF Chair Meg McNall, a partner with Thompson Coburn, who represents the 6 cities. Meg.
Good afternoon, Chair Campbell, Vice Chair Conziolka, and members of the governing body, as well as to CAISO management and staff. Thanks very much for having me today. On behalf of the EIM Regional Issues Forum, I'm happy to provide an update on several developments since my last report at the March governing body meeting. First, following our March 18th RIF meeting, which included the first annual policy initiatives catalog and roadmap roundtable discussion, the RIF liaisons worked together to publish our report of the roundtable, and that report is now posted on the EIM Regional Issues Forum webpage. In our report, we provide recommendations regarding the continuation of several ongoing policy initiative processes, including the price formation enhancements, greenhouse gas coordination, gas resource management, and RA modeling and program design initiatives. And we also recommend the initiation of several new policy initiatives addressing topics related to the resource efficiency evaluation, intertie trading enhancements, enhancements to the CAISO's transmission planning process, and enhancements of rules related to demand response participation in markets. And there is more detail regarding each of those topics and the sector's perspectives on those topics in the report itself. On May 8th, we were given the opportunity by the ISO team working on the policy initiatives catalog and roadmap process to present our findings and recommendations from the roundtable report, and we very much appreciate the continued collaboration with the ISO as it looks to put its catalog and roadmap for 2024 together. Second, the RIF has been working on preparations for our next meeting, which is taking place on June 20th from 9 to 4 Mountain Time. It will be a hybrid meeting at the offices of Idaho Power in Boise. We do anticipate that our agenda for that meeting will be published later this week, but I can share that we are planning to cover a panel discussion on the topic of virtual power plants. That panel discussion is being organized by Vijay Satyal from the PIO sector and newly appointed RIF liaison from the IPP and marketing sector, Rahul Kalaskar. We will also cover a panel discussion on the EIM implementation process with representatives from Bank and Pacific Core. We're looking forward to hearing from them on how the implementation process is going so far, and Lindsay Schleckaway, who is a sector liaison for the EIM entities, will be helping to facilitate that discussion. On behalf of the RIF, I'd also like to make sure I thank Idaho Power for hosting our meeting next month. Finally, the RIF liaisons prepared a set of comments that were posted last week. These comments address the CAISO's proposal in the price formation enhancements initiative relating to rules for bidding above the soft offer cap. Our comments are publicly posted with the joint meeting materials for tomorrow's meeting with the CAISO board and the EIM governing body. And those can be accessed by stakeholders who are interested in seeing those comments. And with that, I will close my remarks, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the governing body or others may have on our activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. Member Decker. You're still muted.
I just want to make a couple of comments about where the RIF is today and the work that the RIF has done. So number one, the roadmap report, and I hope people will take a look at that, is really a value-added document, and both in, I think, to the Cal ISO, but even to the WEIM governing body in terms of what were the priorities, what were the interests, and understanding the different sectors kind of work that they're thinking about and would like to see in the roadmap. So a big applause to the RIF and the liaisons for making that happen. And then I really want to acknowledge this letter that RIF has provided for the soft offer cap. It's a really great example of the RIF doesn't have to all agree, and the RIF doesn't have to come to a consensus, but informing us of your thinking is of real value. And I hope that you will continue to do that as other initiatives come forward. So again, a great applause to the RIF for doing that work.
Thank you so much. And I can confirm, I think on behalf of the liaison group, that we are we intend to continue working to see where we can provide meaningful comments and input on the ISO's initiatives. So thank you.
It's great to hear. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much, Meg. So now we're on to agenda item 6. I will introduce Anna McKenna, Vice President at the ISO of Market Design and Analysis, to introduce this item.
Good afternoon, governing body members. As noted, I am Anna McKenna. I have the pleasure of introducing Guillermo Bautista Alderete, Director of Market Performance and Advanced Analytics. He will be giving us a presentation on the latest benefits for the Western Energy Imbalance Market, as well as a market update for Q1 of 2024. And with that, I'd like Guillermo to provide the presentation.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman Campbell, members of the Western Energy Imbalance Market governing body, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. This brief covers the economic benefits for the first quarter of 2024. Next slide, please. For the first quarter of 2024, we have a total cumulative benefits of $436 million. There are basically 3 main drivers for this level of benefits. First, we have a large footprint consisting of 23 balancing areas that enables a lot of economic opportunities to trade based on the diverse supply that is in the market footprint. Second, we continue to see robust levels of transfers across the different balancing areas that reflects the economics of the wider area. And third, there is economic transfers as a result of economic displacement of higher value energy among the different areas. When an energy transfer is realized, a cheaper energy transfer effectively displaces more expensive generation in the receiving areas. And this level of benefits is measured as cost savings. Next slide, please. With the first quarter of 2024, the total cumulative benefit so far is at $5.4 billion. And this is a good testament of the benefits and the capability of a centralized market to realize all the economic benefits encompassing 23 balancing areas. Next slide, please. Another area of the benefits is about the avoided economic curtailments of renewable resources. If not by the economical transfer realized through the EIM market, we would have additional renewable curtailments. The trend in place shows first the amount of renewable reduction that we have seen historically in the CAISO area, and the light area on the top reflects the avoided curtailments because of the EIM market. There is also a trend that reflects the cumulative avoided renewable curtailment that we have so far. It's very typical, as you may see, that there is a trend of the volume of the renewable curtailment that we experience, and that typically happens during the winter months and the spring early time. And this is a testament, again, of the capability of the centralized market to be able to optimize the energy. Rather than reducing energy, it's more profitable to send it to other balancing areas that are in need of that energy. Next slide, please. We don't have currently additional entities joining the EIM market, But this illustration shows all the composition of the current footprint of the energy imbalance market. And this is a reflection of all the possible permutations of connectivity and therefore transfers that may be realized among the 22 balancing areas. Next slide, please. A significant share of the benefits is from the transfers. And these are the transfers that are enabled to move lower cost supply from one area to another. This is how a locational-based market works, and it's a testament of the power of having a centralized market. The figure on the left stands for the flows that go from the sending area and on the right-hand side to the receiving area. The different stream flows reflect the transfers that may happen between two balancing areas. On the left-hand side, we have the area that is sending the power. On the right-hand side is the area that is receiving the power. And there are many stream flows that reflect all the possible permutations of realizing transfers among the different balancing areas. On the right-hand side, we have the total volume of exports that realized through the first quarter of 2024. On the upper side, we have the CAISO that was the one with the most significant amount of transfers being exported out of that area. On the other end, we have other entities receiving that area by means of imports. Specific to the first quarter, the most significant volume of imports received was from the area of PowerX. Next slide, please. Transfers are quite dynamic. The market is able to optimize those every 5 minutes. And what we can see is that typically they are going to show a standard pattern through the day. For this first quarter, when we have plenty of solar production, we can see that pattern quite explicitly. Specific to the CAISO, we have plenty of solar production that is able to be exported to other balancing areas, and that is how you can see the profile in the negative side. On the other end, there will be many different balancing areas that are going to be able to receive that power, typically in the middle of the day. Most significantly, for this first quarter, you can see that the main driver for the imports was related to the PowerX area. Next slide, please. Moving on to prices. The first quarter of 2024 observed a very interesting dynamic regarding the prices, specifically high prices in January in the Pacific Northwest areas. Specifically, during the Martin Luther King weekend, there was a severe cold weather event that impacted mostly of the Pacific Northwest areas. There were record low temperatures that were followed by peak demand records. These conditions put a stress on the electric grid to the extent that up to 5 different balancing areas experienced some type of emergency. On the financial side, bilateral prices, such as those from the Intercontinental Exchange, ICE, reflected those regional conditions, with prices spiking in the Pacific Northwest and with more moderate prices in California and the Southwest. When we see the CAISO prices as part of the Western Energy Imbalance Market prices, we can see the same regional separation, with high prices observed in the Pacific Northwest area and more moderate prices in California and the Southwest. That was the main event that drove the high prices on average shown for the month of January. After that, prices were tracking more typical trends for the months of February and March. Next slide, please. To understand this dynamic, it's important to recognize how the market operated. And for that, we need to start with how the day-ahead market performed. When we are running the day-ahead market, it's basically the CAISO balancing area, in which we have all the visibility for the CAISO supply, plus the imports that may come to the different balancing areas in order to meet the CAISO forecast, plus the exports that were bidding through the different interties. For a reference, the CAISO typically is going to peak in the summer as high as 52,000 megawatts. During this cold weather event, our peak demand was under 30,000 megawatts. That gives you a sense of how tight or how much demand we have in the system. And on the lower side, the illustration shows the composition of our supply. The portion in blue stands for all the resource adequacy supply available for the day-ahead market, and the area in gray on the top is the non-array supply capacity. There is a line trend that shows effectively the load forecast for the day-ahead market. This gives you a very clear illustration of the supply-demand conditions for specifically the CAISO balancing area. And as you can see, we have plenty of supply available to be able to meet our demand, to the extent that the CAISO market was able to clear up to 6,000 megawatts of exports. When looking at the upper right plot, this is a composition of all the interties, imports, and exports that the day-ahead market clears. The negative values in blue stand for the exports that were able to clear in the day-ahead market. And the positive values in gray and dark blue stand for all the imports that were able to clear in the day-ahead market. There is a trend in yellow that stands for the net interchange for the CAISO. And overall, for the most critical hours of the whole snap, you can see that we were a net export position. This is the construct of the current day-ahead market. Next slide, please. During the long weekend, there were two main conditions at play that impacted the supply and how we were able to meet the conditions of the Pacific Northwest. That was tight supply conditions in the Northwest, compounded with significant transmission congestion and limitation, not only in the CAISO system, but also on the corridors that connect the CAISO with the Pacific Northwest, specifically the Malin Intertie and the Oregon Intertie. Unlike the day-ahead market where CAISO generation and imports are only visible to meet the demand for the CAISO, in the real-time market, we have now full visibility of the total supply that is available across the West in order to meet all the demand of the EIM market footprint. And this is an advantage of having a centralized market that is able to see all the capability, all the supply available, and make the most economic decision to meet the needed demand in the Northwest. Once the real-time market saw all the generation in the wider footprint, it relied on the least cost dispatch and also doing congestion management to identify the supply that could meet all the needs of the Pacific Northwest. Given the congestion that we have experienced in the critical transmission paths, there was cheaper and most effective generation in the Southwest that displaced economically the generation that was scheduled from the day-ahead market for the CAISO area in order to meet all the exports that were scheduled to meet the conditions of the Pacific Northwest. This was an outcome of economic displacement of cheaper and more effective generation meeting the needed demand. It was not a condition in which the CAISO was limited in supply. And this is how eventually this realized in the economic transfers that were implemented for the energy imbalance market in the real time. Next slide, please. One last item in regards to the January event. One of the principles of the Western energy imbalance market is that each balancing area has to ensure that it has sufficient capacity and RAM capability to be able to meet its own needs. Once this test is passed, then the market is basically open up for economic opportunities in the participation of the EIM market. Based on previous experiences, participants of the EIM market work with the CAISO last year to design a mechanism that enables entities to access energy transfers when the balancing area may not have sufficient capacity to meet their test obligations. This is what we call the energy assistance transfer mechanism, for which any entity can voluntarily opt in for any specific trading date. The graph shows here a targeted period during the cold weather events of January to capture the dynamics of the selection that different entities play during these days. There were up to 6 different entities that opted in for that program, and each entity is color-coded for each specific day of that selection. There are also dots markers that indicate when any of these entities failed the resource sufficiency test, in which the mechanism of the assistant energy transfers become critical. During the most critical times, there were 2 balancing areas that gained access of up to 176 megawatts of transfers in real time. This is on 5-minute basis. And this is a good testament of the power of having the energy imbalance market being able to provide not only economic benefits, but also operational, and in some extreme cases like this, reliability benefits. That's all what I have for my briefing. I will be glad to take on any questions you may have.
Thank you, Guillermo. Vice Chair Conziolka.
Guillermo, thank you for that presentation. We always appreciate seeing the value that the WEIM is providing, and it is always of great interest to see how it continues to build and move forward. But today I want to ask you a couple questions about your last few slides on your analysis on the cold weather response in the Northwest. Maybe an unfair question to you, but on slide 17, you were showing us the day ahead position, and then on slide 18, you were showing the real-time response. And if you can, if we had EDAM in place prior to the event, would this have looked any different? Would the response be any different? What would you expect to have seen if we had in fact had EDAM in place across the footprint?
Yes, thank you for the question, member of the governing body. And this is a fascinating question. If we have as a reference point the construct that we have developed with the community of the market, the EDAM would provide a more effective management of the winter conditions in 2 main areas. First, the EDAM would have more capability to see and take into account the overall supply conditions of the wider region, not only the CAISO area, but the whole footprint of the EDAM, which in turn would allow for a more effective economic dispatch of all available supply, rather than what we saw in the January event, that the day ahead, based on the limited supply availability of the CAISO area, then reposition resources in the real time once it gains access to the wider footprint. This would be from day one effectively directly in the day ahead market, because now we consider the wider footprint and all the supply is more effectively dispatched. And the second part would be related to transmission congestion, because once we have that wider visibility and capability of the EDAM, the congestion would be more effectively managed. This is wider visibility that would also mean more integrated and effective congestion management, and the cost allocation of that congestion once we have these critical constraints limiting the flows to go to the northwest. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, just so you know, you did. I don't know if it was for everybody else, but at the very end, you got cut off, at least for me. But you don't need to go back and repeat that. I was able to gather from your explanation that one is if EDAM was in place, it would have been able to optimize the dispatch and movement of energy across the entire West versus just with respect to California. And then two, the congestion management would have been improved.
That's correct. And effectively, that is because under the current construct of the day-ahead market only for the CAISO area, we can only dispatch resources contained within the CAISO balancing area, including imports and exports. Once we have the extended day-ahead market, there will be more resources on the other side of the constraint that can be effectively and economically dispatched to manage the congestion. And that will have implications also for the congestion cost allocation.
Beautiful. Guillermo, thank you. I appreciate that. I suspected that was the case, but I appreciate having the explanation to know that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll just say, Guillermo, I mean, I love looking at this analysis. I can just stare at these numbers for a long time. I think it's really striking how a market like the EIM market can kind of really shine a spotlight on, you know, physical constraints we have in the West. I mean, certainly the January price separation is very striking, kind of pointing to transmission and generation constraints or opportunities. And I think that's another just big benefit of having this market is just kind of really be able to illustrate with some real numbers the value of the assets that we have and could have in the future in the West. So, but I appreciate that very much, and your presentation is always very helpful.
Thank you,
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move to item 7, which is the governing body market expert opinion on the rules for bidding above the soft offer cap. And this, of course, is a joint decisional item, which will be on the agenda tomorrow. And we asked our market expert, Susan Pope, to take a look at what's going on, which is, of course, challenging given the rapid pace of evolution of this particular initiative. But I wanted to introduce Susan. Very, looking forward to hearing her insights on this policy. Susan.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. And it really was a fast ride on this one, I'll tell you, especially since I wasn't actively tracking the initiatives on storage resources. So it's been very interesting. So good afternoon to you and greetings to other members of the governing body, executives of the CAISO, and to everyone else participating in this video conference. As Chair Campbell said, I'm Susan Pope, and I'm the WEIM market expert. So during the next 15 minutes, I'm going to quickly walk through my opinion on the California ISO management's proposed changes to rules for bidding above the soft offer cap. Next page, please. So first, just a brief word of explanation. Throughout the presentation, I referred to rules for the summer of 2024. This is my way of referring to rules proposed to be operational sometime during the summer of 2024. After reading the California ISO board memo on this topic, I thought I would like to clarify, especially given the wording that I use in my presentation, that the proposal is not for rules that will apply only during the summer of 2024, or that there is an expiration date proposed for the rules. My understanding is that the CAISO plans to continue to work with stakeholders on a number of aspects of its rules for bidding above the soft offer cap, but that what we're talking about today is a proposal for what is feasible to implement sometime during the summer. So I just wanted to clarify that point because I think it is possible to misread my presentation. So, okay, in the remaining time, I'm going to quickly cover the motivation for the management's proposal to changing the rules for bidding above the soft offer cap, explain my opinion on the two elements of the proposal and my understanding of the rationale for the proposal. What was the process, and what were the constraints and the considerations that led to the proposal that the CAISO management put before you. I'll conclude with a brief discussion of pros and cons, and then take questions from the governing body and stakeholders. So, okay. All right, we're on the right page here. So the motivation for management's proposal is that today hydro and storage resources may be dispatched uneconomically at prices less than their opportunity cost. So a couple minutes of what I'm going to say here may be redundant to those of you who have been listening to and participating in all of the working groups to come up with this proposal, but I'm just providing some explanation on this page, thinking that there may be members of the broader EIM community that might not have tuned into that whole process. So what's going on here is that for resources with limited energy, like storage and hydro, there can be a cost of selling energy at one point in time that's driven by expectations of what price could be obtained by selling the energy later. So that's what we mean by an opportunity cost. In this case, it's actually an intertemporal opportunity cost. So the cost is occurring because the cost of selling at one point in time from the perspective of the seller is being driven by the expected price that the seller could get for the product at a later point in time. So what's been observed in the EIM is that resources with intraday opportunity costs may not be able to bid high enough to preserve their limited energy to be able to sell it in the highest priced hours. Okay, so that's where some of the uneconomic dispatch comes from. So the reason that they can't bid high enough is that their opportunity costs are actually greater than their bid caps. So there's a limitation on them bidding higher that is in the CAISO market rules in the form of the bid caps. They can't bid high enough to prevent being dispatched uneconomically at prices that are less than their opportunity costs. Okay, so let's say their bid cap is $1,000, their opportunity cost is $1,300, the price rises to $1,100. They are going to be dispatched at $1,000, but the power that they're being dispatched to provide, they really think they could sell it at $1,300 later. They didn't really want to dispatch it, but their bid cap was $1,000, so it gets dispatched. So sometimes this is happening or can potentially happen because other resources, such as gas resources, which have a way to reset their bid cap higher than the bid cap that hydro and storage are currently capable of achieving. Say gas may have place its bid cap higher than them. So as a result, the storage and hydro will be dispatched in advance of the gas, for example. They just can't bid high enough to put themselves in the right place in the bid stack. So the consequences of this are that limited energy may be dispatched earlier in the day before intervals when their energy actually has the highest value or might be needed for reliability. A related problem that came up very frequently in the stakeholder groups is that energy limited resources may not be able to maintain their day-ahead market schedules. So they may be experiencing a loss in net revenue because they can't adhere to their day-ahead market schedules, although I understand that there are BCR rules to help with some of that situation. The consequence of all this uneconomic dispatch are the negative impacts on the net revenue of hydro and storage resources. increases in the cost of serving load. That's what I mean by increases in dispatch cost, and decreases in the energy available in critical hours during tight system conditions. So, you know, one of the concerns that was identified by stakeholders and by management, by the CAISO during this process, was that limited energy storage resources in particular could be depleted prior to the very tight peak hours when their energy could be critical for maintaining reliability. So this lack of flexibility in the bidding potentially has very real reliability consequences. The final thing that was noted by some stakeholders, particularly in their comments, is that the issue with the offer caps has the potential to discourage offer-based participation in the EIM by resources with potentially high intraday opportunity costs. So, you know, the EIM is going to work best and most efficiently and most reliably when, you know, we're creating a set of market rules that supports and provides an incentive for all the resources to be bidding in at their costs. So to the extent that we've got rules going on here that are discouraging participation, it's definitely something to be trying to fix. Next slide, please. So the objective of the proposal that CAISO management has put forward is to enable storage and hydro resources with intraday opportunity costs to reflect those costs more accurately in their energy offers, and enable them to preserve their limited energy for hours when it would be most valued. So it has proposing to meet this objective through two discrete proposals, two discrete aspects of this overall proposal, labeled 1 and 2 here. So the first proposal, which the CAISO, I think, rightly calls a process change, addresses the problem with the bid cap insofar as it applies to hydroelectric resources. And I'll explain this a little more in a couple minutes. This first proposal, however, doesn't sufficiently address the problem for storage resources. So the relaxation of the bid cap that's achieved through proposal 1 doesn't sufficiently enable storage resources to bid sufficiently high enough to reflect their opportunity costs. And for this reason, at least to the best of my understanding, management's put forward this second proposal, which applies just to storage resources and would enable storage resources to bid high enough to reflect their opportunity costs. So in simple words, and I'm going to say this simply because I think that the way that this gets expressed using the language of the market rules gets kind of overly complicated and hard to understand. The first proposal addresses the problem of the hydro bid, the bid cap as it applies to hydro, by letting the bid cap for hydro rise to reflect the actual verified costs for hydroelectric resources. Again, the overall effect of this proposal 1, despite kind of the complicated way that it has to be explained in light of the market rules, is it allows the hydroelectric resources to bid up to their verified costs. So getting into the details a little bit, the way that it's done is by raising the cap on the default energy bids. So reading what's specifically proposed in the CAISO memo, they propose to revise the cap on all default energy bids from $1,000 to $2,000 in both day-ahead and real-time markets. So revision and relaxation of the default energy bid cap lifts the cap on offers because the offers are capped by the DEB. Furthermore, it's justified because the DEB, the default energy bids, are considered cost verified. The default energy bids are constructed for the purposes of market power mitigation. So they are basically cost verified to start with. And what proposal 1 does is it lifts the cap on bids up to this cost verified level as expressed by the default energy bids. I just wanted to note that the offer cap rises to the DEB, default energy bid, not $2,000 a megawatt hour, because I think that was a point that I noticed some stakeholders getting a little confused about on some of the calls that I listened to. Proposal 2 modifies the offer cap for energy storage resources using a proxy opportunity cost value. Again, this proposal 2 arises because proposal 1 does not sufficiently lift the offer cap for storage resources. The actual formula for the default energy bid for storage resources depends on a number of variables, and the value of those variables doesn't rise enough to push the DEB up enough, to push the bid cap up enough, to allow storage resources to reflect their intraday opportunity costs. So specifically, the proposal is for the offer cap for storage resources to be the higher of $1,000, the 4th highest maximum import bid price for the day, and the highest cost verified offer for the hour. Notably, and I think importantly, this raises the offer cap for storage, but not the storage DEB. Okay, so the default energy bid remains the same for storage under proposal 2. Next slide, please. So this page and the following page provide my opinion on the CAISO's proposal. So I support the proposal to raise the cap on all default energy bids from $1,000 to $2,000, both day ahead and real time. And I will get to this issue of should this be day ahead and real time or just real time at the bottom of this page, because this is an important change that was introduced in the middle of the last week by the CAISO management after consideration of the opinion of the Market Surveillance Committee. So just to get through the easy stuff first, I support the proposal because it addresses the primary objective of this initiative. It enables hydro to avoid dispatch when price is less than its opportunity cost, where the default energy bid is based on the opportunity cost. So it enables hydro to position its dispatch more economically when it's energy limited. So this proposal is great. It accomplishes that central objective. For hydro resources, it applies equally to all specific resources that are addressed by FERC Order 831, which I think is the right thing to do. And arguably, maybe it should have occurred sooner to allow these resources to bid up to their verified costs. I also think there's relatively low regulatory risk for this aspect of the proposal because the default energy bid methodology, which is serving to verify the costs of the hydro, is established. So it seems a relatively low risk from a regulatory point of view. Now, as far as to the application of this element of the proposal to both the day-ahead market and the real-time market, I supported this, in my opinion, which I wrote prior to CAISO management posting its board memo, in which it changed the proposal to apply the proxy bid cap for storage to just the real-time market. So actually, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here and nobody said anything. I need to talk about my opinion on the second proposal first. So next slide, please. So I also support the proposal to modify the offer cap for energy storage resources using the proxy opportunity cost value. In this case, I support this proposal because it appears to be the best solution available in the near term to enable management of storage state of charge in advance of peak hours. So it seems like the best solution that is feasible in the near term, that is for implementation by this summer, to achieve the objective of letting storage manage its intraday state of charge, its intraday dispatch. I think that there are improvements that can be made to it, but I think this is a good proposal for this summer. As I said, the CAISO analysis showed that this additional piece of the overall proposal was necessary because lifting the cap on the DEB would not solve the problem for storage resources. Because the default energy bid is unchanged, market power mitigation will limit storage resources when there is insufficient competition. So there are still aspects of the problems for the dispatch, the intraday dispatch of storage resources that are not addressed by this proposal. And one of them occurs because the DEB isn't changing. And because the default energy bid isn't changing, if storage is mitigated within the day, its offer will be reset down to its lower DEB, and it could still be prematurely dispatched before its energy is most valued and potentially needed for reliability. A second issue, which the MSC brought up, is that while this proposal definitely moves in the right direction, and I think will be helpful if the CAISO encounters a situation in which intraday opportunity costs rise above $1,000 this summer, there's an additional kind of companion problem, which is the 75-minute time step and the 75-minute lag between real time and the prior point in time at which storage offers can be changed. So while this allows storage offers to be increased, the operator of the storage resource has to be on the ball and change it 75 minutes before real time. So that's a potential limitation, but it's something that can be evaluated after this change is put in effect. So now moving on to the next slide, please. So actually, no, going back, sorry. I had to reorganize a little bit here because of the change in the that was introduced by the board memo. So this is the slide where I want to talk about the change in the proposal under which the bid cap for storage will only be lifted to the proxy level in real time. And I supported that, in my opinion. And the reason for my support is, the one that the CAISO's talked about, stakeholders have talked about, that application of the same bid cap in the DAM and in the real time is consistent with, a major goal of market design and price formation, which is convergence of prices between day ahead and real time. There have been all kinds of examples of problems that have arisen in markets because of systematic differences in price formation in DAM and real time. So that's a pretty good reason. A second reason I supported it is because the DMM analysis showed that few storage resources actually bid over $1,000 on days when the proposed changes would have been triggered. So it didn't seem like lifting the cap in the DAM was likely to have much effect. Additionally, typically, market power doesn't tend to be as much of a problem in the DAM as in real time. So I didn't see a really big concern about the potential for market power, but then again, you never know. So I didn't see at the time I wrote this a reason to be extremely concerned about the proposal to apply to extend proposal 2 into the day ahead market. That being said, I'm not going to disagree with the decision by management to, not apply this in DAM this summer. I don't honestly think this is an issue to fall on one sword about. I agree that applying it in the dam isn't necessary to achieve the primary objectives of this initiative. There's been concern expressed about the possibility of unintended consequences of applying this in the dam. I don't know what those are. I think that's pretty vague, but I also acknowledge that unintended consequences can also be unanticipated consequences. So, things can happen. So, I'm comfortable with just applying this in real time and seeing how things shake out. There could be problems with price formation by not applying it in the dam. On the other hand, parties could get comfortable with the idea that with having more data, that maybe there might not be unintended consequences. So that you could ask me some more questions about that, I guess, when we get to the Q&A. So I need to wrap up relatively quickly here. I think I've reached the end of my time. The next 2 slides really just they are slides to provide my view of the reasoning behind. I was trying to synthesize and make it simpler for people to understand how we got to these 2 proposals. So what this page, your slide 27 says is the CAISO went and did a pretty good job looking at, hey, what are the market rules that are limiting the ability of hydro and storage to bid higher than 1,000? And they really drilled down and identified what are the market rules causing the problem and thought about how can we change those for this summer to address the problem. Next slide, please. And this slide is a complicated slide that really, I think, goes at it. It helps to explain my my opinion agreeing with proposal number 2, which is that the things that I think could improve on how storage bid caps are handled are just not feasible for this summer. So you'll see on the right, the CAISO said it's infeasible to change the DEB calculation for the summer. Well, I think there are a number of reasons that the DEB for the storage resources needs work, but you can't do it for this summer. Over on the left, you'll see something else that I think is really important, which is that storage and hydro offers, storage in particular, because the hydro, I think, was solved by proposal 1, needs to be able to rise in advance of the tight periods. So all kinds of alternatives that were kicked around that had to do with, say, using the maximum import bid price curve just won't work, because that bid price curve does not arise in advance of the periods where the shortage is likely to occur. We need storage to be able to increase its bid in advance of those periods, save its water so that it can provide it during the short times. And that's coupled with the thing on the bottom statement that the CAISO didn't feel it could implement caps that vary by location or hour this summer. So those 2 things combined argue for, I think, the most important piece of proposal 2, which is the proposal for the offer cap for storage to be the 4th highest of the maximum import bid price curve for the day. Okay, so not going to spend any more time on that slide, but I'll be happy to answer more questions on it. Next slide, please. So the CAISO rules for, just in summary, these are the main pros I see for the proposal. I think they touch on economics, equity, and reliability. I think I've talked through all of these. The only additional point that I want to make is that I agree with the MSC that reliability is I think it's very difficult. I can imagine that it would be very, very difficult for the CAISO operators to manage reliability of energy limited resources, a lot of them through exceptional dispatch. When you take into account that all those resources are probably entering stress conditions with different levels of state of charge, some might need to charge, some might be ready to discharge. They sit at different positions behind transmission constraints. I think in the idea, in the fact that running too short risks triggering $2,000 prices, operating these storage resources at the wrong time is really, really tricky. Okay, so I think managing reliability through enabling more flexible bids is preferable and could reduce the use of exceptional dispatch. Next slide, please. The concerns, not really concerns, just things to keep an eye on are FERC approval. I think they could question whether the proxy offer cap for storage is cost verified for all hours. I think that's reasonable. I'm hopeful that they'll see that it's a very, very reasonable proposal to get in place by this summer to manage the possibility that tight conditions could occur this summer. I think as the CAISO develops this proposal, it would be good to examine whether there are any unintended consequences of triggering $2,000 penalty prices in additional hours, and whether there's any potential for the higher offer caps to allow the potential exercise of market power. I don't see any, but I think these are things that perhaps folks haven't spent as much time as they should thinking about. Next slide, please. So on balance, my opinion is that the potential benefits of the CAISO proposal outweigh the cost of potential issues that have been identified. You know, it's not perfect, but I think it's a really good proposal considering how quickly the stakeholder process went. And I think the CAISO did a good job of considering a number of alternatives. It's a reasonable approach. The proxy offer cap for storage might be too high in some hours, but more granular alternatives just aren't feasible right now. And, you know, my view would be that it's preferable to let it be a little too high in some hours than make it too low in hours when it's really important for the storage to be able to not be dispatched. The depths for storage might remain too low in some hours if they're mitigated, but again, that can be changed this summer. So anyway, sorry I ran a little over there, but I think I covered everything, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Susan. And after we go to questions from the governing body, there's opportunity for public comment. And I forgot to do public comment for the prior items. So if you do have public comment also on the benefits and market update, you can provide that when public comment opens up here, and Guillermo is still available. We'll go to Member Prescott.
Okay, Susan, thank you for this presentation. Very, very good information. So, and also I'm sorry you had to get kind of whipsawed into things changed in real time. You had to adapt your presentation, but we understand that. And, you know, we're looking for the greater good here. But the question I've got kind of deals in the last change that we heard about, and that is, or this idea of, we're talking about hydro resources and storage. Hydro resources under this proposal, the cap would be allowed to go to 2,000 for both real time and day ahead, but not so for storage. Storage, it's real time, but not day ahead, if I'm reading that correctly. And if that's true, do you see that as discriminatory against storage? I've heard that term thrown out there. In other words,
yeah, I saw that.
So I'm just wondering, is that true, or are they not similarly situated and they perform differently? And that would be a reason to discriminate, if that's the word I can use.
Well, you know, I think the first thing that is important to point out is that the first element of this proposal to remove the deb cap applies to both storage and hydro. So the second piece of this proposal is an add-on to further provide flexibility for storage, because storage in particular tends to have you know, maybe only 4 hours of energy, right? So the reason for the second piece is really aimed more directly at resources that have intraday opportunity costs. It's sort of more narrowly aimed. And some hydro has that, and some hydro doesn't. And I'm not convinced that, you know, parties need to get a better handle on exactly where the intraday opportunity costs come from for hydro. So I think this issue of, you know, applying the rules, you know, equally to everyone is something, you know, to be considered. I think that what the CAISO has done is very reasonable in that regard. I mean, I think honestly, the participant that's the class of participants that's been left out is the demand response. So, and I mean, I perfectly understand why it's very hard to get a grip on what their opportunity costs really are in order to properly set default energy bids or bid caps for them. But I think that that's kind of a slippery slope, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. If you start going down that equal treatment path.
But if I could just follow on, so I guess maybe a thing to do is in the longer term solution, which I'm sure this begs, you would consider all these things when you had more time.
In the longer term solution, yes, you do address opportunity costs and think through how you would appropriately set both default energy bids and bid caps. They're not the same thing. Taking into account, you know, all kinds of different opportunity costs that that impact resources differently, right? So hydro resources, for example, it's explicit in the design of their DEB. They have longer term opportunity costs and potentially shorter term opportunity costs, right? You know, I think the expectation is that demand response may have its own type of its own types of drivers for opportunity costs. I think opportunity costs, personally, I think one of the big pieces that needs to be worked on is how they vary geographically. And I mean, this was given some airtime in discussion of why the system marginal cost, for example, of the CAISO is not appropriate for measuring, say, opportunity costs for the Pacific Northwest, or even for shaping their maximum import bid price. You know, there are many, I guess I'm trying to say the discussion of opportunity cost is going to be a lengthy one.
Okay, thank you.
Many shapes and forms.
Vice Chair Kanzioka.
Chair Campbell, thank you. Susan, I too want to thank you for the presentation and material and for your flexibility and responding to this dynamic change. I think the short time frame is indicative of all the work that's been done by everybody to provide input and for staff to respond and try to have the best proposal possible for the summer. And that's where I wanted to drill down just a bit on need with you. I believe I heard you go through this, but I just want to make certain that I'm clear on this. And that is, you said you support the proposal as it is, and that it's a very reasonable and positive proposal based upon the limited time and to have something for the summer. Some of the arguments out there were, you know, although it's good, we don't have to necessarily be pressed to get it for the summer. Why don't we consider waiting, develop a true comprehensive proposal, and then implement it, let's say, for next summer? And but you know, as you have pointed out, there are a number of issues that drive for this summer. So I just want to be clear on the need that you do see that the value and need for having this proposal for this summer is there from your perspective.
I think so. I mean, my perspective on the need reflects what I read from stakeholders and the data that I saw presented by the DMM and the CAISO, which indicate that storage really cannot bid to position itself correctly in the 24-hour dispatch when prices rise above $1,000. They can't do it. And you know, I was concerned by the statements by, you know, some stakeholders explained how they'd tried to use, say, end of hour state of charge constraints to better manage how they're dispatched over the course of the day, and how they found those very unworkable. And you know, in some of the statements by the Northwest Hydro about how they need to be sure that their hydro isn't being uneconomically used in case they need it themselves to serve their own load later, and that they want to be able to bid so that, you know, it's not going to disappear out from under them when they need it. So I think those are big issues, I think, that the stakeholders raised. And I think that the DMM and the CAISO backed that up with some data. And so I don't know, you know, whether the supply demand balance is going to get so tight this summer that you're going to need a great deal of precision in when storage is dispatched. But, you know, you've had low hydro for a number of years, and you just don't have as much extra in the system. So I just think this is conservative in terms of really, what do they say? Hope for the best and plan for the worst, or something like that. Do I have it backwards, Elliot?
We just generally think hope is not a strategy. So we appreciate where you're going. Yeah.
Okay, well, whatever. Plan for the best and plan
I like where you're going and agreeing with the sentiment. Yeah, thank you.
Plan for both. So, you know, maybe it's not necessary. I don't see a huge potential downside from it. You know, if someone could come forward and describe, here's how this could, here's one way this could blow up, right? In a really way that met some threshold of concern, that would be something different. But I don't think that's happened.
So put it another way, you see this as low risk, high benefit.
I see it as relatively low risk, high benefit. I mean, I understand there's an opportunity for inflated bid cost recovery under some circumstances, but I mean, that will, you know, that could happen if you have a lot of $1,000 days. But if you have a lot of $1,000 days, that's also why you want some bidding flexibility. So on balance, I do think the benefits outweigh the risks.
Susan, thank you very much.
Thank you. I had one question, Susan, and we're kind of running long on time, but so the proposal 2 is that there's this proxy opportunity cost value. You know, there's some concerns about this particular metrics there from some stakeholders, but I guess what are there particular consequences of sort of having that proxy maybe a little bit too high or a little bit too low? Like are there risks associated with sort of kind of where that proxy is set that we should be thinking about?
I mean, I don't really. Within the range of movement, I'm thinking what's going on in my head is moving it up a little bit or moving it down a little bit. I don't think makes a lot of difference, right? If there's some unidentified potential for market power here, I think it's going to happen whether you increase or decrease that proxy cost by $200 or $300. I don't think that it's going to matter too much there. I think that it just needs to be high enough for storage to avoid being enough storage to avoid being dispatched prematurely. You know, it needs to be able to bid above reliability demand response. You know, when you're getting to the point where you know, you need reliability demand. You think you're going to need reliability demand response to keep the lights on. It's better to use that sooner and keep some of your storage to have your storage available to use later. So I guess that's how I think about that, Andy, is it seems like it's high enough to get it in the right place in the bid stack, and fine tuning it a little bit doesn't make that much difference.
Okay, thank you. Now, Silas, if you could please provide direction for public comment and then you can go. We already have Callie Wells with Gridwell with the hand up. So if you could go to her after providing the directions, please. Thanks.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon on Zoom, or if you're dialed in on our phone line, you can please press #2 to enter the queue. Now, Callie Wells with Gridwell, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself. You can go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Callie Wells with WPTF. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. First of all, we really appreciate you providing your opinion on this proposal. We too don't see any reason why specifically that your proposal number 2, where it increases the bid cap for storage, shouldn't also be included in the day ahead, but I think we'll use the same words you used. We're not going to fall on our sword for that one. You know, we've been giving it quite a bit of thought as to the equitable treatment that this proposal is providing specifically between storage and hydro resources. And that, you know, hydro resources under this proposal will be able to reflect those intraday opportunity costs in the day ahead market, whereas storage cannot. And that's because of that last minute change that was just made, I think Friday afternoon. So I wanted to dive a little bit into that because our understanding of what the CAISO is proposing right now is that the uncapped DEB portion of this proposal, to where they're uncapping the default energy bids for all resources, actually does not apply to storage resources. So they will remain capped at 1,000 for their default energy bid in both the day ahead and real time. And I was hoping if either you or the CAISO can confirm our understanding on that.
I wasn't aware of that, Callie.
Okay, is there
I think just Callie, just thinking kind of format wise, I mean, this is really Susan's presentation right now. So I think I'm focusing on kind of her opinion. Now you would like to hear the answer to your question, but I think it's probably most for the ISO staff part of it, most appropriate for the joint meeting tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we can definitely raise that there as well. It was just mentioned during the presentation that it applies to all resources, and wasn't quite sure. That wasn't our understanding, so I wasn't quite sure if that had also changed as well, because the draft tariff language has that in there. But we can definitely hold that till the joint meeting tomorrow if you'd rather.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and staff is here to hear it, so hopefully they'll proactively incorporate that into their presentation tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And again, really appreciate your opinion. I liked how you laid out kind of the pros of having this in the day ahead market as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other comments?
No, there are no other hands up in the queue at this time.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Susan, for that presentation and for the work you did on short notice digging into this issue.
You're welcome.
So now I will once again introduce Anna McKenna to introduce the presenter for the next item.
Well, good afternoon. I have the pleasure of introducing Becky Robinson, our Director of Market Policy and Development. Becky will be walking you through some highlights of our policy initiatives and also the upcoming WEIM governing body planning calendar. And with that, I will ask Becky to go through the both items.
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, Chair Campbell, Vice Chair Kanzioka, and members of the governing body. I'm here today to give you, as Anna said, the highlights of our of what we have going on for policy initiatives. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, starting first off with the Western Energy Imbalance Market Resource Sufficiency Evaluation enhancements. The update here is that we are continuing to progress towards implementation of some enhancements to the e-tagging process. These we are expecting to be in place on July 1, so coming up at about a month and a bit from now. And this will align the e-tags with the market results to enable identification of those lower priority exports in the event that we get into such tight conditions that post-market curtailments are necessary. And then we are still planning on later this year, kicking off a resource efficiency evaluation enhancements phase 3 policy initiative. We've got my colleague Guillermo and his team working on some analysis currently to inform that policy effort and to get us kicked off on the right foot there. And that will be a joint authority item. Once we get more, no date yet as to when that would come to you, but we do anticipate that being joint authority. Next slide, please. And I should say, please do feel free to interrupt if you have any questions as I go through these. All right, so next item, our extended day-ahead market and day-ahead market enhancements. A couple updates here. On April 12th, we made a filing with FERC on the EDAM access charge. This was an element that you'll recall FERC had rejected without prejudice in its December order last year, where it approved the rest of the EDAM tariff. Specifically, the EDAM access charge provides for transmission revenue recovery for EDAM transmission provider revenues that may be impacted as a result of market participation. We stuck with the same design that was approved by you and the Board of Governors last year, just providing additional clarification and explanation as requested by FERC. And over the past few months as well, I should note that the team was working with stakeholders to kind of work through that and sort of get everyone on board in terms of our path forward. We were glad to see that filing drew no protests at FERC, and so we look forward, hopefully, to seeing an order from them in about 60 days from when we filed it. So that would be mid-June. Another update on EDAM. On April 30th, FERC accepted our compliance filing, which we had put in February. This was, again, teeing off of that December order last year where they accepted the bulk of the EDAM tariff with the exception of the item that we just talked through. So again, nothing too controversial in that compliance filing, just putting some additional language in the tariff, but we're glad to see that order and see get that all squared away. And then finally, on the day-ahead market enhancements, we do continue to plan for implementation working groups to begin later this year. Next slide, please. Next up, our transmission services and market scheduling priorities, or wheel through. So I think when we last talked, I will pause. I see a hand.
Member Decker.
Go ahead. I just was getting in the queue for a question.
All right.
Oh.
At the end of the slide.
Okay. Right. Okay. So this year, from January to March, we had the opportunity for participants to request wheel through priority starting in June of this year. we saw some requests come through, and we're able to grant those. We were able to grant all of those in whole or in part. Only one was just in part. And those requests were wheeling through the ISO from the Northwest down to points in Nevada or Arizona. In April, we were able to implement the automated systems that we had been working on and working towards that functionality. This automated system supports the calculation of monthly ATC, available transmission capacity, and processing those requests. And the daily ATC functionality will become available actually later this week. It's going to be May 25th, which is a week before that June 1 date. So we look forward to having that in place and as we head into the summer. Sorry, it just dawned on me that I said that the summer it's almost here. Yes, sorry. Seeing it on the screen. Sorry about that. We did, as far as the resale tariff provisions, we did file a petition for waiver at FERC regarding the resale provisions. That's just not quite ready, that functionality, but we anticipate being able to implement that in late Q3 of this year. And then finally, on the long-term process, so this is the Transmission Services and Market Scheduling Priorities Phase 2, which is focused on that study and expansion process if you want wheel-through priority on a basis of 1 year or more. That is currently, we've had some conversations about that recently, but wanted to flag for you all that we're putting that on the back burner for now. A couple reasons for that. We are in the process of submitting our compliance filing to FERC Order 2023, dealing with the interconnection process enhancements. And that order requires certain changes to the annual cluster study process. It's possible that those changes would implicate the process that we've sort of have been working on to incorporate long-term requests for wheel-through priority. And so we decided that it makes the most sense to sort of work on that FERC Order 2023 compliance first, get through that process, hear from FERC that yes, what we've worked on there, complies with that order. And then sort of once we get to that next juncture, we will reevaluate sort of the status and strategy on that long-term wheel-through process. I'll recognize that, FERC in last year's order on the wheel-through item noted that the wheel-through process the long-term process is not necessary. We're free to file one if we choose, and they'll evaluate it. But they did not. We don't have a hook from FERC requiring us to come back with those long-term process procedures. And we've also, been in conversations with external stakeholders, and we haven't heard any particular, demonstrated interest in this long-term study and expansion process as of now. So we'll certainly, stay on top of those conversations, keep in touch with those market participants. And as I said, sort of work through the interconnection process enhancements and that process there to stay coordinated. And we will, reevaluate when we get to sort of some additional milestones down the line. With that, I see a couple hands.
Yep, Member Decker.
So Rebecca, thanks for the update on the wheel through. So I have a question on the first bullet. So where it says all valid requests for monthly ATC were awarded in whole or in part. So in part sounds like there was still pent-up demand that did not get satisfied. Or were there other requests that did not get satisfied? I'm just not sure how you get to a part.
I believe it was just the one, to the best of my knowledge.
So was there still pent-up demand? So we weren't able to meet all the requests?
It may have to. Might be getting a phone a friend assistance.
Yeah, how about if you just follow up with me afterwards? That works.
I think the simple answer is correct. Not all demand requests were fulfilled. So I think if the question is, did we fulfill all requests? Some were not fulfilled, but there was a substantial amount that was. I think that's the question you were asking, Anita.
Yeah, well, it says all valid requests were, it kind of makes it sound like all valid requests were fulfilled, and
There
then
were
it reads,
some
no, maybe not.
requests, right, there were some requests that were made at locations that were not eligible, and those were not fulfilled.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Kanzioka.
You, Chair Campbell. Maggie, thank you for this overview on this item, and I too have a question. It's actually a clarification question on the first bullet item, and this might require a phone a friend as well. I'm not trying to get into specifics. First of all, I think it's great that that ISO was able to meet the request as shown. And the question I had is when looking at the previous years, are we seeing the same robustness? And you know, in other words, in quantity and in both in request and in quantity, or does it look drastically different? And I realize that resources change, and I realize positions change, so you know there's no direct comparison. But I was just curious if we've seen a divergence from previous practices. That's all.
That is a great question. I may need to get back to you on that unless I've got a couple of folks in the room here with me. But I think we can follow up on that.
Yeah, okay. Again, it's not a big issue. I was just, you know, more for interest to see just the level of interest that we have in the use of the wheel through with the changes being implemented.
Gotcha. Sure.
Apologies, we only have one microphone in the room, so I apologize for getting up and down. But so the answer to your question is yes, there were few, in terms of prior year's request for the priority wheel throughs, there were fewer priority wheel throughs requested. So there was a bit of a change in practice in that regard, as you noted. But also in prior years, the locations at which requests were made were consistent with the ones we saw this year. So there's usually the same locations that seem to be of most interest.
Anna, thank you.
Thanks, Anna. All right. Next slide, please, unless there's any more questions on wheel through. All right. Okay, next item are rules of conduct and penalty enhancements. First, an update on our rules of conduct enhancements phase 1, having to do with meter data penalties. We implemented that. We got a FERC order in late March and implemented that on April 1 of this year. Happy to get that change in place. And then on penalty enhancements, so this is really the phase 2 work, then we issued a straw proposal at the end of March. We are working currently on a revised straw proposal that a little bit of an update since this deck was publicized, but should be going out later this week. And the matters sort of being addressed in the straw proposal phase of the penalty enhancements phase 2 work include demand response monitoring data, the timeline and submission timelines and penalties associated with that. The rules of conduct investigative process and streamlining that process on our side. Updating the penalty tolling process in terms of who's holding the money when, if a market participant goes to FERC to seek relief on those penalties, and materiality threshold for meter data penalties to apply at all. And that item, that phase 2 work, is proposed to be, proposed decisional classification of joint authority, and tentatively that should be coming to a joint meeting in September of this year. Next slide, please. All right, moving into our working group efforts. First up is price formation enhancements. The top line item here is the rules for bidding above the soft offer cap that we just heard Dr. Pope present on, and which we'll be bringing to you and the Board of Governors tomorrow at the joint meeting. Just to highlight, that is, that item is looking at policy change. We've been having conversations with stakeholders over the last several months about changing the rules to better allow for limited energy resources, such as storage and hydro, to incorporate opportunity costs into those supply offers when we get into those over $1,000 situations, over the $1,000 soft offer cap. And that is aiming for an implementation by, we say, late summer on here. We have been targeting an August 1 implementation target. And we've had lots of activity on that item recently. It's sort of been taking up a lot of the oxygen and the price formation enhancements effort, but straw proposal April 23rd, draft final proposal early May, and we've published a final proposal since then, board documents, draft tariff language, all of that good stuff. So more on that one tomorrow, unless you have questions today. But also under price formation enhancements, I do want to flag that on April 8th, my colleague Guillermo presented some analysis on the potential market impacts in the Western energy imbalance market of fast start pricing, doing a market simulation there, and sharing that with stakeholders, having that conversation. We did, got comments on fast start pricing, I think about a week and a half ago, and we are really using those as well as kind of the work in the working groups up to date to now to really kind of think about and do some internal planning and conversations with stakeholders as well on kind of a big picture roadmap going forward on price formation enhancements. We've got, lots of meaty topics under these three big umbrellas of scarcity pricing, BAA level market power mitigation, and fast start pricing. And we really want to sort of do some work to prioritize and sequence, create a clear roadmap, and, sort of based on everything that we've heard from stakeholders, but moving into sort of more, I'll say maybe moving a bit more into policy development, moving on from sort of some of the problem statement type of conversations into policy development. So good things to come there, and looking forward to continuing those conversations with stakeholders. So
Becky, to that third bullet, and I appreciate that the soft offer cap item is has sucked up the oxygen for now. So in the past, there were some nice kind of flow charts of where some of those work streams might be headed. Do you expect to update that or create something else that kind of, once you've sort of gone through this reevaluation of the work streams, and when or how might that be shared?
I think that's a great suggestion. I like the flow charts because they're, they give a sense of, sort of big picture, when can you expect certain conversations to be happening. So I think, thank you for that. We, can certainly update those in line with our thinking. We are planning to put out a paper sort of outlining this roadmap to stakeholders. I would say sometime in the June timeframe is our target currently. So I think maybe next time we meet, there'll be more, we can be more specific about that, but hoping to do that sort of as our, next step in price formation enhancements. And we'll include those flow charts there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. All right, next up, our Greenhouse Gas Coordination Working Group. I think we've reviewed the first two bullets here before. I'll just flag, in the third bullet that the most recent working group meetings, the last couple of them, have really been sort of digging into potential solutions. And we've got 3 solutions on the table that we've been working with stakeholders to kind of flesh out. And those would be to reflect non-priced state climate policies, some alternatives using sort of in-market constraints, and one using sort of a post-market accounting approach. And so really kind of getting into the pros and cons, how those would work, some examples, and we've got good voices in that conversation with market participants, as well as consultants that work in this this space, as well as some state partners at state agencies as well. So it's been a really exciting discussion area for discussion. Next slide, please. Gas resource management working groups. Again, I think we've reviewed most of this, the first two bullets before. I'll just flag that we actually published earlier today, a discussion paper sort of documenting the work of the working group as it's sort of over the trajectory of that working group, and really kind of outlining those stakeholder recommendations for policy development. So that is available now, and look forward to continuing to work on that topic area with stakeholders. Next slide, please. The resource adequacy working groups. Late April, we issued an updated discussion paper and draft recommendations where we laid out these various tracks going forward for what are the issues under resource adequacy that we want to tee up, and how we kind of propose to bucket those and work with stakeholders on those. I won't go through each of those here, but there is quite a number of topics sort of within resource adequacy that there is appetite from to work on, and this is sort of the high level how we propose to divide that work up. And we do, as far as that discussion paper, we do plan on iterating. We're going to do 2 rounds of iterations with stakeholders to kind of incorporate the initial feedback that we just got, I think, last week, and then publish an updated paper and take further comments on that, just to sort of make sure that we're all aligned and understand each other's positions as we move forward. Next slide, please. I think this is my final item. Day ahead sufficiency. So this is an issue that we have been stakeholdering. It has to do with how the EDAM processes will apply to the California ISO BA. And in particular, the resource sufficiency evaluation test is performed at the BA level. So the stakeholder conversations have been talking through kind of just the daily processes heading into that resource sufficiency evaluation test, including how we're going to estimate the amount of resource offers sort of before the actual market run, before they're actually due for the market run, so to speak, and procedures for calling on additional resources if those are needed and warranted. So we put out a strong proposal on May 6th, had a stakeholder call the following week, and are getting stakeholder comments later this month. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I see a hand. Member Decker.
Member Decker.
Yeah, so just so on this slide, this only pertains to the California BA.
So yes, the
okay, so it's not an initiative we need to worry about.
Correct.
Thank you.
No, thanks for that clarification. Okay, and here we've got our policy initiative process diagram, and on the next slide, we have something new for you, which is, so this and the next slide, I won't go through each of these line by line, but here you have a little bit of a color-coded chart looking at the year 2024 divided into quarters, and kind of seeing how each of these policy initiatives is, how we see them falling on the calendar through the rest of the year. I'll note the darker colors indicate sort of further along activities. For instance, the lightest color you see for working groups and discussion papers, and then sort of medium green for that issue paper straw proposal, and so forth. So this is something new that we put together for you. I think there was a request for sort of seeing a little bit more of the trajectory. Where are we going over the next several months through the course of the year? So happy to take any feedback on this. If you have a look at it, see what's helpful, what do you still want to know that's not represented here, and but yes, hope it's helpful. And with that, I think this is my last slide. So happy to take any final questions.
Thank you, Becky. Member Decker.
So Becky, I really like these last two slides. They're really graphic, easy to read, very clear. This was a really nice representation of what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you. I will be sure to pass that along to Alyssa, who put them together for us on our team. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from governing body members? Okay, now we'll go to public comment.
If you'd like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon on Zoom, or if you're dialed in through the phone line, you can press #2 to enter the queue. Jessica Zanau is in the queue. Jessica, you're sent a prompt to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Yeah, Jessica Zana from Puget Sound Energy. And Becky, I just had a question about your decisional classification on the day-ahead deficiency. I don't see anything posted on that. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
That's a great question. And thank you for flagging that. Yes, we usually include that on these slides and don't have it here. So this item, we have been stakeholdering this, so we opted to include it here as part of, as one of the policy initiatives to provide an update on. But I will say that we're not necessarily anticipating, although we're just at the straw proposal phase, so things could change, but we're not necessarily anticipating that this would require or end up in tariff revisions at this point. So sort of to Member Decker's question, this is really kind of thinking through when EDAM is in place, what does that mean for the California ISO BA, right? And as a BA. And so it's really sort of more a conversation about what are the processes for how the BA will, how the RSE test, for instance, will apply at the California ISO BA level, given the myriad market participants, right? And sort of how all that rolls up into a BA level test. And so don't necessarily anticipate tariff revisions being needed for this as of now, in which case I do not believe we would need to bring it for approval to either the Board of Governors or governing body. So that's one reason why you don't see a decisional classification on here, is because we're not necessarily bringing it for approval. As of now, it's more sort of a question of getting everyone on the same page as to how those processes will work.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would push a little bit on what Member Decker said with regard to whether or not the WEIM governing body needs to be following this or aware of this. If I'm not oversimplifying it, and perhaps I am, but I would say that there should be congruency or at least comparable treatment with how the CAISO BA meets the RSE as well as how the EDAM entities or WEIM entities meet the RSE. And so to the extent that this creates, comparable or not comparable treatment, and if there are tariff revisions that I think we'd ask that the ISO consider joint authority on.
No, absolutely. I take your point about, absolutely agree on the, this initiative or the stakeholder conversation isn't meant to establish different rules for the CAISO BA compared to other EDAM BAs. It's more meant to, but appreciate the emphasis and why you're asking the question, because I agree. I think that's a very important point. So yes, happy to kind of closely monitor this conversation and, report back with any changes as needed. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jessica. And I think on the same theme, I think to the extent there's future iterations of the green, the 2 pages with the nice timelines, I see right now, it looks like they're alphabetical order, could be helpful to sort of group together the California BAA focused ones from, as opposed to kind of more market applicable ones, just as a quick visual. although I recognize sometimes it's not until later in the process it's clear what exactly an initiative is going to do. But Member Decker, you have another comment or question? Oh, you're muted.
Since we don't have influence under what other BAAs do at all, I don't think that the California BAA work should show up in our board book. I mean, that's not something we have purview over. And so I think there's a separation of duties here between market and the ISO BAA.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. We were debating whether to include it or not, and opted to do so, but I appreciate the point and happy to have one less slide in this deck to talk to you all about next time. Who knows, maybe we'll kick off something else new to replace it.
Okay, I think that's I see no more public comment. So thank you very much, Becky, for the presentation and
thank you.
In response to questions. So now we'll just quickly, the last two agenda items, agenda item 8, which is informational reports. Do governing body members have any questions about the informational report attached to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Item 9, future agenda items. Are there any future agenda items people would like to raise at this point? Okay, with that, we've reached the end of the meeting. Any final remarks? Okay, great. I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Campbell.
Thanks, Andy.
Yep. Thank you, Andy. Everyone take care now.